Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are reading Sri Aurobindo's The Synthesis of Yoga, a book that has beautifully synthesized thousands of years of yogic tradition in India and given us integral yoga. And the very purpose of reading is to immerse in Sri Aurobindo's consciousness so that it leaves its imprint in us, and that is sadhana in itself. For those who are new, the link in the description will give you the chapter we are reading. And today we are into episode 110. This is chapter 9 of part 1, Yoga of Divine Works. This chapter is about equality and annihilation of ego. In the last episode, 109, we read about equality going beyond all the dualities of reactive nature and establishing in that unshakable calm. And in order to do that, also bring that perspective and glimpse of oneself behind all things, people, events, happenings. Everything is a mask, a veil, revealing different degrees of the same self. And nothing happens without the sanction of that one self behind all things. Therefore, begin to see beyond the appearances, behind the mask, that universal and transcendent self in action here. That will help us to establish in the equality of the soul and mind, which will enable us to open to greater action of the Shakti. Now we move on to this episode. We are starting with paragraph number 8. This equality cannot come except by a protracted ordeal and patient self-discipline. So this self-discipline is going to last for long. It's a protracted ordeal with all its challenges. Life brings all kinds of challenges to really show us where the gaps are in our equality, where we are reacting, getting entangled with life, judging, saint, sinner, good, bad, success, failure, all that. So this equality cannot come except by a protracted ordeal and patient self-discipline. So long as desire is strong, equality cannot come at all except in periods of quiescence and fatigue of desire. And it is then more likely to be an inert indifference or desire's recoil from itself than the true calm and positive spiritual oneness. Couple of very, very interesting statements here. The fatigue of desire. Often we get into this space, no energy, tired of everything. So desire itself subdues. And that's not a state of equality. It is only a fatigue of desire. And or there is an inert indifference, or desires recoil from itself. So with inertia comes indifference, and inert indifference. That is not equality. And desires recoil from itself. That's another way. Desire steps back, a recoil. None of them are actually the true calm, and positive spiritual oneness. So these are all appearances, not truly the calm that we are seeking. So this equality cannot come except by a protracted ordeal and patient self-discipline. So long as desire is strong, equality cannot come at all. So long as desire is strong, equality cannot come at all, except in periods of quiescence and fatigue of desire, and it is then more likely to be an inert indifference, or desires recoil from itself, than the true calm and the positive spiritual oneness. Positive spiritual oneness. Now, in our lower nature too, we do feel with those who are close, this deep sense of empathic bonding connection, which is not what is referred here. It's a very positive spiritual oneness built on calm, wide, infinite freedom and joy. Moreover, this discipline or this growth into equality of spirit has its necessary epochs and stages. So our growth is not something that happens quickly. It has stages and it has its long period required. This growth into equality of spirit has its necessary epochs and stages. What are these epochs and stages? Ordinarily, we have to begin with a period of endurance. Endurance, that's the key word here. Ordinarily, we have to begin with a period of endurance. For we must learn to confront, to suffer, to assimilate all contacts. So we are always in contact with life that is around. Through all five senses, the contacts are coming. Pleasant, unpleasant. Everything is pouring into our experiential space. In that, we have to confront them, sometimes suffer them, and assimilate them. Anything that we are not able to assimilate, that's where the trouble starts. So assimilation of all experience is very, very crucial. Lack of assimilation, we know in the very physical food level, when there is no assimilation, when there is indigestion, all kinds of problems starts. Similarly, psychologically, there is indigestion and a problem of lack of assimilation. This is what leads to suppressions and all kinds of diseases and challenges. So we must learn to confront, to suffer, and to assimilate all contacts. Every contact. It's very easy when it is a pleasant contact, enjoyable contact, to absorb it. But when there are difficult ones, challenging ones, that's where the confrontation and sometimes the suffering of that entanglement, interaction. But in spite of all that, enduring it and assimilating it is a necessary stage. Each fiber in us must be taught not to wince away from that which pains and repels, and not to run eagerly towards that which pleases and attracts, but rather to accept, to face, to bear, to conquer. Take, for example, heat. What is the temperature range where you can comfortably function? When you get used to air-conditioned environments, you see that your bodily tolerance limits shrinks into a small bandwidth. And when the temperature goes low or when temperature goes up, you start shaking, you find it impossible to function. So these are like simple, direct physical, environmental conditions to which we get adapted, we get used, but body has a tremendous capacity to adapt to heat and cold. So here I am talking only about sensation at the level of heat. Then there are human interactions, psychologically complex interactions where things can get pleasant or unpleasant or difficult. So training ourselves to increase our range, possibility to confront, deal with, suffer even necessary, if necessary, and assimilate come into picture. Each fiber in us must be taught not to wince away, not to shrink, not to react from that which pains and repels, and not to run eagerly towards that which pleases and attracts, but rather to accept, to face, to bear, to conquer. So often, in the name of this equality, ascetic tendency sets in. But Sri Aurobindo has made it very clear. If you are a seeker, you must be able to enjoy the comforts of a 5-star hotel or very rudimentary basic material conditions. Whatsoever is available, without reaction or without preference, you must be able to function within the full range with perfect equality. Rather to accept, to face, to bear, and to conquer. So each fiber in us must be taught not to wince away from that which pains and repels, and not to run eagerly towards that which pleases and attracts, but rather to accept, to face, to bear, and to conquer. All touches must be strong to bear. Not only those that are proper and personal to us, but those born of our sympathy or our conflict with the worlds around, above or below us, and with their peoples. Worlds. He's not just talking world, worlds, plural here. Conflict with the worlds around, above, below. These are references to subtler dimensions of our existence. What we experience as this physical world is only one aspect, one dimension. There are subtler dimensions above and below, and these are all worlds. And in that worlds, they have their beings peopled with their activities going in these worlds. So we are coming in touch with all this, not only physical world, other worlds as well, developing the ability to confront, to assimilate, to integrate, accept, all that. So all touches we must be strong to bear. So developing that resilience, strength, not only those that are proper and personal to us, but those born of our sympathy or our conflict with the worlds around, above or below us, and with their peoples. So what is this? That which is very personal to us, and then that which is coming through our empathic attunement with other people. When you are attuned with other people, their difficulties, their challenges, their experiences pours into your personal space. Similarly, when you are in conflict with someone, their energies, their issues, all that pours into your personal space. So those born of our sympathy or our conflict with the worlds around, above, or below us, and with their peoples. So, our relationships with these in this world, or the worlds above, or worlds below, and the beings, all that we need to learn to confront, accept, assimilate, integrate. We shall endure tranquilly the action and impact on us of men and things and forces. Of men, things, forces. Note these three things: men, things, forces. The pressure of the gods and the assault of titans. Now, these are things quite beyond the range of our normal human experience. But as you enter the path of yoga, you begin to notice forces beyond your grasp, operational in the world around, even interacting with you, engaging with you, confronting you, positively, negatively, all that are happening. We shall endure tranquilly the action and impact on us of men and things and forces, the pressure of gods and assault of titans. Gods. We need to distinguish between God and gods, forces of nature. These are gods. The one source is what we can refer as God, and there are, out of one source, multiplicity of beings, forces presiding over different dimensions and operations of things. So there are gods and assaults of titans, the gigantic forces, but ego-bound, self-centered, the titans. We shall face and engulf in the unstirred sea of our spirit all that can possibly come to us down the ways of the soul's infinite experience. We are on an experiential journey of the soul. In this journey, there is this unstilled seas of our spirit. That is what we need to discover and grow into, so that all that are pouring in can be assimilated into this vastness. We shall face and engulf in the unstirred seas of our spirit. This reminds me of the line from the Gita where Arjuna was asking Sri Krishna, how would a Stita Prajna would walk, behave? And Sri Krishna gives a beautiful image of a sea, an ocean into which all the rivers are pouring. But the sea is immobile, achala pratishtam, immobile and stable, established, in spite of all the rivers and streams pouring into it. We shall face and engulf in the unstirred seas of our spirit all that can possibly come to us down the ways of the soul's infinite experience. This is the stoical phase period of the preparation of equality. So that's the particular period. Remember, there are various stages of our development of equality. This is the Stoic period where we are using our will and discipline to master the contacts of life. It's most elementary and its heroic age. So this Stoic period is the heroic and elementary stage of our growth of equality. This is the stoical period of the preparation of equality. It's most elementary and yet it's heroic age. But this steadfast endurance of the flesh and the heart and mind must be reinforced by a sustained sense of spiritual submission to a divine will. So this endurance, period of endurance of the flesh and heart and mind, so the bodily, emotional and mental. So this steadfast endurance of the flesh and heart and mind must be reinforced by a sustained sense of spiritual submission to a divine will. When we begin to, first of all, starting with acceptance that everything that is happening is nothing but the divine will. And submission to the divine will, that's what helps us to progress on this way. This living clay must yield not only with a stern or courageous acquiescence, but with knowledge or with resignation, even in suffering, to the touch of the divine hand that is preparing its perfection. So we are being prepared, molded by the divine will. And it is always the hands of the divine who is molding us. And we need to keep that in mind all the time so that we don't get trapped into our ego sense of I am the doer and I am suffering and the world is making me suffer. All that perceptions get erased when we begin to see it's one divine will behind all things and it is shaping you. So, but this steadfast endurance of flesh and heart and mind must be reinforced by a sustained sense of spiritual submission to a divine will. This living clay must yield not only with a stern or courageous acquiescence, but with knowledge or with resignation, even in suffering, to the touch of the divine hand. Hand here is with capital H. It is the hand of the divine who is shaping you, that is preparing its perfection. We are getting prepared into our possible perfection. So the divine hand is molding like a potter would mold a clay. That's what is happening. A sage, a devout, or even a tender stoicism of the God lover is possible. And these are better than the merely pagan, self-reliant endurance, which may lend itself to a too great hardening of the vessel of God. For this kind prepares the strength that is capable of wisdom and love. Its tranquility is deeply moved calm and passes easily into bliss. So there is a chance of our vessel getting hardened, and this happens when our endurance is born out of our ego and its will. I am the doer. I am the one who is flexing the muscle, hardening our skin. So there is hardening of the vessel of God that can happen when it is a self-reliant endurance. I am enduring with my own will and capacity. Instead, if we focus on it is the divine hand that is molding and preparing and perfecting you, and you're surrendering to that will, and your endurance is created by that divine will and divine hand, then this kind prepares the strength that is capable of wisdom and love. That is where the suppleness, the openness, the wisdom and love can enter, when it is the divine molding you to perfection. Its tranquility is a deeply moved calm that passes easily into bliss. So a tranquility, not a hardened opacity, insensitivity, but a profoundly sensitive state, but tranquil and stable, deeply moved calm that passes easily into bliss. Because end of the day, the nature of the divine is Sat Chit Ananda, blissfully conscious existence. It is to that which we are opening, and let that shape the instrumentation. Instead, if we rely on the self-will, that's where we harden. and we think I have arrived at equality. No, you lost your fine sensibility. You hardened. Therefore, instead of taking that path, we open to the divine will to mold and perfect and retain the fineness and tranquility which can deeply move into the experience of bliss. The gain of this period of resignation and endurance is the soul's strength, equal to all shocks and contacts. So you become equal to all contacts. Soul becomes strong to bear the contacts of life. There is next period of high-seated impartiality and indifference. So now we are moving on to the next stage, impartiality and indifference. From endurance, we come to impartiality and indifference. It's not an inert indifference here, it's a conscious indifference, in which the soul becomes free from exaltation and depression. So our outer nature has a tendency for exaltation. It has a energy level going up or depression energy level going down. The huge flux that happens at an energetic level, that gets stabilized, in which the soul becomes free from exaltation and depression and escapes from the snare of the eagerness of joy as from the dark net of the pangs of grief and suffering. So all these dualities are overcome. So escape from the snares of the eagerness of joy. An experience that is joyful, naturally our vital being has an eagerness to go for that joyful experience. But then it becomes a snare, a trap. On the other hand, there is the dark net of the pangs of grief and suffering. The dark net in which we get caught of grief and suffering. All this are the vortexes into which we fall into. This equality helps us to quietly walk out of all this. There is next a period of high-seated impartiality and indifference in which the soul becomes free from exaltation and depression and escapes from the snare of the eagerness of joy as from the dark net of the pangs of grief and suffering. All things and forces, all thoughts and feelings, and sensations and actions, one's own, no less than those of others, are regarded from above, by a spirit that remains intact and immutable and is not disturbed by these things. So when we detach ourselves and rise above, that's where this perspective comes in. That immutable status of the spirit that is not disturbed by these things. That's what liberation brings, this immutable poise. All things and persons and forces, all thoughts and feelings, and sensations and actions, one's own no less than those of others. So we are part of this network of relationships. Everyone is interacting and impacting each other. So there is a constant exchange happening, impact happening between people. So one's own, no less than those of others, are regarded from above by a spirit that remains intact and immutable and is not disturbed by these things. Undisturbed, witness poise, immutable self, liberating itself, rising above. These provides the ground. This is the philosophic period of the preparation of equality, a wide and august movement. Philosophic period of the preparation of equality, where we are looking at the world from this point of view of either neti, 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 not this, not this, no, these are not the aspects of the truth and the divine, and iti, 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 this is the divine true nature, and moving into that pure, free, wide infinity of the spirit. This is the philosophic period of the preparation of equality, a wide and august movement. But indifference must not settle into an inner turning away from action and experience. Now, this is a very common error when people take on the path, particularly those pathways that proclaim liberation as the ultimate goal of life and the world itself as an illusion. And purpose of life is to withdraw and escape from this samsara, from this dukkha. There is an issue of indifference must not settle into an inert turning away from action and experience. Action in the world. Kurukshetra. World is a battleground of action. And it has its consequences. Pleasant and unpleasant experiences. Not to withdraw from action and all the experiences that action brings. It's very, very important in integral yoga. It must not be an aversion born of weariness, disgust, and distaste. Aversion. It's not any kind of aversion born of weariness, disgust, and distaste. A recoil of disappointed or satiated desire. Desire recoils when there is disappointment or satiation, but only temporarily. When it is satiated, desire withdraws, but only for a short period. It will come back when the hunger returns. The sullenness of a baffled and dissatisfied egoism forced back from its passionate aims. Ego passionately hunger after its results of fruits of action. And when you don't get it, ego gets dissatisfied. And that's where the sullenness of a baffled and dissatisfied egoism forced back from its passionate aims. These are all the type of movements we discover within ourselves. Ego's passion, its recoil, its sullenness, or satiation of desire, causing desire to withdraw, or disappointed desire with recoiling, all that. And we are not looking for an aversion born of weariness, disgust, and distaste. All that. None of that is really the equality we are looking at. These recoils come inevitably in the unripe soul. Unripe soul. In the previous episode also we read about the unripe soul, who revolts against things habitually, unconsciously. These recoils come inevitably in the unripe soul and may in some way help the progress. By a discouragement of the eager, desire-driven vital nature, but they are not the perfection towards which we labor. So even such recoils does help us to see through a discouragement of eager, desire-driven vital nature. Our vital nature is bound by desire and driven by desire, and these discouragements, these recoils help us to see it and make progress. These recoils come inevitably in the unripe soul and may in some way help the progress by a discouragement of the eager, desire-driven vital nature. But they are not the perfection towards which we labor. The indifference or the impartiality that we must seek after, The indifference or the impartiality that we must seek after is a calm superiority of the high-seated soul above the contacts of things. This is what we are looking for. Calm superiority of a high-seated soul above the contacts of things. It regards and accepts or rejects them, but is not moved in the rejection and is not subjected by the acceptance. When we accept various contacts of life that is around, often we get subjected to it. We get carried away by it. We get colored by it. That's the issue with subjecting ourselves, accepting various type of interactions with the life that is around. We get subjected, we get colored, we get impacted. That's not what we are looking at. Nor is moved by rejection. Even when we reject, there too, there is a corresponding movement that happens within them. So the indifference or impartiality that we seek, that we must seek after, is a calm superiority of the high-seated soul above the contacts of things. It regards and accepts or rejects them, but is not moved in the rejection and is not subjected by the acceptance. So there is a calm superiority with which we are able to reject or accept without being affected by rejection or acceptance. It begins to feel itself near, kin to, one with a silent self and spirit. Self-existent and separate from the workings of nature, which is supports and makes possible part of or merged in the motionless calm reality that transcends the motion and action of the universe. So when we look around, nature is continuously moving. Everything is moving. When we look into our inner subjective space, here again we see the streaming of thoughts, sensations, emotions, energies. There is a continuous movement. All these are movements of Prakriti, nature. Within that is the awakening of the witness, Sakshi, the Purusha. And the deeper we go into the status of the Purusha, the witness consciousness, the pure soul, just standing back and observing, we discover the deep stillness of the being, the deep silence of the being. And from there we can widen into the infinity of the soul's vast, self-existent freedom. So it begins to feel itself near, kin to, one with a silent self and spirit. So when we step out of the nature's movement, we are entering into a silent self. There's pure silence in the being and spirit. Self-existent and separate. This exists on its own. Separate from the workings of nature that is moving as thoughts, sensations, emotions, energies, impulses, and all the physical movements inside, outside, everywhere. That's Prakriti, that's nature. Self-existent and separate from the workings of nature, which it supports and make possible. It is this silent self and spirit that makes possible the workings of nature. But this is not something that we recognize in the early stages of our inner development, which supports and makes possible, part of or merged in the motionless calm reality. Motionless calm reality. Here R is capital. So as the liberation deepens and widens and even ascends, that's where we discover the motionless calm reality that transcends the motion and action of the universe. This transcendental, immobile poise, that's where true freedom of the spirit is. The gain of this period is of high transcendence. We are stepping out of the entanglements, we transcend them, we free ourselves from them. The gain of this period of high transcendence is the soul's peace, unrocked and unshaken by the pleasant ripplings or by the tempestuous waves and billows of the world's movement. Two images that he's giving us: pleasant ripplings. That's when you are liberated and freed up and widened. The Prakriti is still there, acting. And it is on the ground of your being the Prakriti is moving. And when there is profound calmness, the action of the Prakriti is experienced like breeze. The pleasant ripplings, like a calm lake on which the breeze is flowing, moving, and there is a gentle ripple. That's one way the nature works. Then there is the tempestuous waves and billows of the world's movement. Now here, he's referring to world's movements. A liberated individual, when the consciousness is free, you break out of the bodily molds, and there is a vaster calm, wider being, transcending, going beyond this body, but embracing the wider world. And world movements of the nature, vaster movements of the nature, that is experienced as the tempestuous waves and billows, massive currents of larger movements that goes beyond the individual human being. It's the vaster currents of nature of which you become the bearer, witness, enjoyer. So, and you are not moved by any of these things. You are able to hold these currents. The gain of this period of high transcendence is the soul's peace, unrocked and unshaken. Unrocked and unshaken. So there is peace perfectly stabilized. Unrocked and unshaken by the pleasant ripplings or by the tempestuous waves and billows of the world's movement. So you are the stage in which things are happening. That's the experience to which yogi enters in this deepening of the equality. If we can pass through these two stages of the inner change, so this first stage is of endurance, second stage is of the indifference, deepening into that wideness, without being arrested or fixed in either, because one can easily get stalled, stop your progress, either in the endurance stage or in this stage of indifference. We have to transcend both these stages without getting stuck in any of that. If we can pass through these two stages of the inner change without being arrested or fixed in either, we are admitted to a greater divine equality. Here we are entering into a third stage, a greater divine equality which is capable of a spiritual ardor and tranquil passion of delight. Tranquil passion of delight. Generally, the word passion is associated with some form of nervous heating and excitement. The spiritual passion referred here is something tranquil, something that is actually very cool, cooling, calming, not heating and burning. Tranquil passion of delight, a rapturous, all-understanding and all-possessing equality. Not only understand, it is also all-possessing equality of the perfected soul. An intense and even wideness and fullness of its being, embracing all things. So our ability to embrace the wider world movements, wider life currents, wider oceanic existence of the dynamic nature, all that increases in degree to which we grow in perfection of equality, from endurance to indifference, to this wider opening into the tranquil passion of delight, a rapturous all understanding and all possessing equality of the perfected soul, an intense and even wideness, and fullness of its being, embracing all things. Nothing is excluded. You're not recoiling from anything. Everything is embraced in your vastness. This is the supreme period, and the passage to it is through the joy of a total self-giving to the divine and to the universal mother. So, this supreme period and the passage to it. So we have to go through these stages of endurance, indifference, and this tranquil delight, tranquil passion of the divine. This is the supreme period, and the passage to it is through the joy of a total self-giving to the divine and to the universal mother. Our human individual effort cannot take there. Human individual effort at the most can take to the silent, static self to liberate. But this whole dynamic side of existence, to enter that, humanly impossible. One has to surrender to the divine and to the universal mother. It is she who prepares, shapes, and make you perfect and capable of bearing this. Remember this image of Shiva sitting with his jata and the descent of Ganga into his matted hair. It represents the descending current of a higher force into this perfected status of the being. And mother's force can enter and perfect and widen you only when that equality is established, and that very same equality is taken into its dynamic embrace of the larger existence by the universal mother. So a joyful self-giving to the divine and to the universal mother, that is what enables this passage into these higher possibilities. For strength is then crowned by a happy mastery. Peace deepens into bliss, and possession of the divine, calm, uplifted and made the ground for possession of the divine movement. There is a divine creative movement that is upholding everything, unfolding everything in time and space. Not just individual movements, collective movements, the world movements. There is a divine movement behind all things. Even to know it and to bear it, this is an absolutely necessary condition to be established. For strength is then crowned by a happy mastery. Peace deepens into bliss. Peace is a neutral state. This very same peace, when it deepens, naturally, it becomes bliss. The possession of the divine calm is uplifted and made the ground for the possession of the divine movement. Possession of the divine movement. In a way, we can say the divine take possession of the instrument. An instrument, when it is capable of transmitting the divine movement. When I say transmitting, it is not just this tiny little human body we are referring to. The human body, when it opens up and identification expands into wider life that is around Through that, there is a divine movement that takes possession, and we become the masters of that movement. But if this greater perfection is to arrive, the soul's impartial high-seatedness, looking down from above on the flux of forms and personalities and movements and forces, must be modified and change into a new sense of strong and calm submission and a powerful and intense surrender. Powerful and intense surrender. Quite paradoxical terms here. And yet, that is what surrender brings. Surrendering to the Shakti that alone brings this profound dynamism of the greater consciousness. If this greater perfection is to arrive, the soul's impartial high-seatedness, looking down from above on the flux of forms and personalities and movements and forces. So when you're looking down from above, what do we see? The flux of forms, personalities, movements, and forces. So you're looking down upon all this from above on the flux of forms and personalities and movements and forces. Because there are many personalities of the Divine Mother who is working and moving the world, and their subordinate powers that are animating things and world movements. So on the flux of forms and personalities and movements and forces must be modified and change into a new sense of strong and calm submission and a powerful and intense surrender. So it's not enough to just witness, surrender to that dynamism. So if this greater perfection is to arrive, the soul's impartial high-seatedness, looking down from above on the flux of forms and personalities and movements of forces, must be modified and changed. This high-seatedness of the soul, perspective from above, must be modified and changed into a new sense of strong and calm submission and a powerful and intense surrender. A powerful and intense surrender. This submission will be no longer a resigned acquiescence, but a glad acceptance, for there will be no sense of suffering or of the bearing of a burden or cross. Love and delight and joy of self-giving will be its brilliant texture. So it's not that you are suffering on behalf of God here on earth. No. Its very brilliant texture is love and delight and joy of self-giving. That's the very nature towards which we are growing. So this submission will no longer be a resigned acquiescence, but a glad acceptance. For there will be no sense of suffering. We have to entirely erase this suffering from our being. There will be no sense of suffering or of the bearing of a burden or cross. So the work in the world, action in the world is not experienced like a cross that you're carrying. It's not a burden. These are limited perspectives and experiences. Instead, we are looking at arriving at love and delight and joy of self-giving. That will be its brilliant texture of our action in the world. Karma Yoga, arriving at this experience. Work is not a burden, it's not a cross, it's not a pain, it's not suffering, but an expression of love and delight and joy of self-giving. And Divine's mighty currents flowing through you. And this surrender will be not only to a divine will, which we perceive and accept and obey, but to a divine wisdom in the will. So there is a divine will and there is a wisdom in the will, which we obey. But to a divine wisdom in the will, which we recognize, and a divine love in it, which we feel and rapturously suffer. Here, word suffer is nothing negative. It's a rapturously suffer, accepting, enjoying that. The wisdom and love of a supreme spirit. So, will, wisdom, love, all three coming together. Wisdom and love of a supreme spirit and self of ourselves and all with which we can achieve a happy and perfect unity. This is what is God realization is. Union with the divine. This is where we are asked to enter. This surrender will be not only to a divine will, which we perceive and accept and obey. So that's the very first stage, recognizing the divine will. Accept, first perceive, then accept, then obey. And then to a divine wisdom in the will. We have to see the divine wisdom operating in the will. We are opening to knowledge, which we recognize. Then, and the divine love in it. So there is, in the will we see a wisdom, and within that we see a love. Divine love in it, which we feel and rapturously suffer. We have to actually feel the love of the divine. And wisdom and love of a supreme spirit and self of all ourselves and all, with which we can achieve a happy and perfect unity. So that's what we are looking for, a perfect union with the divine. Not only a static union, but a dynamic union in this manifest existence. And lonely power, peace and stillness is the last word. And lonely power, peace and stillness is the last word of the philosophic equality of the sage. And lonely power, peace and stillness is the last word of the philosophic equality of the sage. But the soul in its integral experience liberates itself from this self-created status and enters into the sea of a supreme and all-embracing ecstasy of the beginningless and endless beatitude of the eternal. So from the static self, there is an embracing of the dynamic self. And that's really the endless beatitude of the eternal, which is beginningless and endless. So from the yogic perspective, universe has no beginning or end. It is endless. A lonely power, peace and stillness is the last word of the philosophic equality of the sage. So various traditions that focus on pure static liberation, you become a sage, but its perfection is a lonely power, peace and stillness. That's the last word of a philosophic equality of the sage. When we go beyond that, that's when, but the soul in its integral experience, liberates itself from this self-created status. This self-created status is of the static freedom. Immobile, silent self. Freedom of that. From there, enters into the sea of a supreme and all-embracing ecstasy. All-embracing ecstasy. Supreme and all-embracing ecstasy of the beginningless and endless beatitude of the eternal. This is the dynamic Shakti, and this can only be arrived through the grace of the Divine Mother's force acting through us and shaping and perfecting the instrument. Then we are at last capable of receiving all contacts with a blissful equality, because we feel in them the touch of the imperishable love and delight, the happiness absolute that hides ever in the heart of things. Everything, right at the core of it, there is this happiness absolute. the pure love and delight of the divine. So then we are at last capable of receiving all contacts with the life that is surrounding us. We are immersed in this ocean of life that is around, all contacts with a blissful equality, because we feel in them the touch of the imperishable love and delight. This love and delight is self-existent, it's imperishable. The happiness absolute that hides ever in the heart of things. The gain of this culmination in a universal and equal rapture is the soul's delight and opening gates of the bliss that is infinite, the joy that surpasses all understanding. So that's the culmination towards which we are moving, bliss that is infinite, joy that surpasses all understanding. So this is the kind of realization we are asked to embark upon, to seek after the union with the divine. This is the nature of that experience. The gain of this culmination in a universal and equal rapture is the soul's delight and opening gates of the bliss that is infinite, the joy that surpasses all understanding. So that's how you become a perfected instrument through which the delight of the divine can pour through, express. And in order to do that, the instrument has to be perfected, and this perfection cannot come by human effort, only by opening to the divine Shakti, the divine mother. Her force alone can do this. A happy surrender to her action is the way for an integral seeker of the integral path. And that leads towards an integral realization of both static and dynamic self in our being. That's the culmination towards which we are moving. That sounds really amazing what Sri Aurobindo is pointing at. And we can see many traditions focusing on the static liberation alone. They speak only about peace, shanti, nothing else. At the most, some compassion. We never see the ecstasy and dance that he is referring here. The absolute love and delight and this infinite bliss, joy that surpasses all understanding. A dynamic creative force that flows through the instrumentation. That's where Karma Yoga leads, Yoga of Divine Works. So with that, we come to the end of this episode. Thank you for being with me. Please do share your insights, your feedback, your suggestions, and looking forward to see you next week. Thank you.